is my great pleasure, it is my great pleasure to introduce Bill Gibson, who is almost on camera. Hold on, let me get him on camera. Bill, there we go.
You look great, Bill.
Yes. And Bill will be doing an introduction.
Okay. All right. I was very impressed listening to Victor Mitchell talk at the Western Conservative Summit. He's a businessman who has, since the age of 13, always worked for himself, from being a newsboy to running a wireless company. Today he heads Lead Funding, a major real estate lender. 2007 to 2009, Victor Mitchell served in the Colorado House of Representatives. 2011, he headed the organization Save Colorado Jobs, led to the defeat of Proposition 103, statewide ballot measure that would have raised income and sales taxes. Thank you for that. Mitchell, along with his wife of 27 years, Amy, has been active in numerous community organizations, including Meals on Wheels. Amy and Victor have 3 children, including a son at West Point. So Victor, I look forward to hearing about your health knowledge and healthcare alternative.
Well, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. This is, I have to plead guilty, this is my first presentation to a Libertarian group, and I'm so honored to be here. I love so much of what the Libertarians stand for, because as an entrepreneur, we have so much in common about doing things differently, thinking about things differently. And my name is Victor Mitchell, and I am a candidate for governor. And I'm asked all the time, Vic, why exactly are you running for office? It's a fair question. And the answer is you can be frustrated, you can be angry, you can be disillusioned, you can be cynical with the way our current government functions. We elect people that run from one office to another and they promise us things, but nothing ever gets delivered. Or you can put yourself out there and be part of the solution. I choose to be part of the solution. I come at this a little bit differently than most. I've been a serial entrepreneur since I was 21 years old. I've only signed the front side of a paycheck. I come at this as an outsider, and I come at this as a family man. But I think it's really, really important. I should back up for a second. Amy and I actually came here to Colorado 22 years ago. And it was never our intention to stay. What happened, like with many people who come here in Colorado, we fell in love with great outdoor spaces of Colorado, the people of Colorado, but most especially 2 of our 3 kids ended up being born here, and it's really become our forever home. But make no mistake about it, there's things that are happening in Colorado that we can't seem to get anywhere. I'm really worried as a people that we're electing politicians and not leaders. Where our healthcare system is failing, 40%, I'll talk about that in a few minutes, where so many people have insurance but can't afford to meet their deductibles or co-payments. We've got an unbearable amount of regulations. Just since 2009 alone, we've had 120,000 pages of rules and regulations affecting small business and entrepreneurship. So I think it's also very important to bring somebody in as an executive, somebody with deep private sector experience. Because at the end of the day, running for governor is like electing the next CEO of the state. I also think it's really important as a candidate to put forward big and bold and fresh ideas to move our state forward. I know Bill cares a lot about health care, but I think it's equally important as regulation reform. As I touched on earlier, since 2009, under the current administration, we've added 120,000 pages of rules and regulations. Now, I was elected as a state legislator a decade ago. Very proud of that service representing Douglas and Teller counties. We had roughly 1,000 businesses in one form or another that were regulated under the Department of Regulatory Authority. Today that number is 3,500. This is a period of 8 years. We're regulating all types of businesses in all types of different ways. And many of them, make no mistake about it, is to protect special interest groups, to prevent competition, to keep prices artificially high. Let me give you a couple examples specifically. Vocational trades. We hear so much about our kids don't want to become electricians or plumbers or carpenters. That's not been my experience at all. We've traveled the entire state of Colorado. We've been to 58 counties. We've done over 350 grassroots events. And what we're finding is that there's many kids who are graduating from Colorado public high schools that would love to become electricians. The problem is we have apprenticeship periods. They're up to 5 years long for many of these kids to break into these trades. The apprenticeships are so long where they basically have to work for basically very little or no money at all, that it has a tremendous chilling effect. My plan is to basically allow vocational trades to be taught directly in public schools, most especially in rural parts of our state, and reduce the long apprenticeship periods where industries like electricians and plumbers should be regulated by trade associations as opposed to the Department of Regulatory Authority. I believe that builders, we have a tremendous issue in Colorado about affordable housing. You guys would know that better than anybody here in Boulder. We're having that same problem here in Douglas County where we live in Castle Rock. Matter of fact, most of the people that work in local government in Castle Rock can't even live in Douglas County because it's so expensive. So when I was in the legislature less than a decade ago, the Democrats controlled 40 seats in the House of Representatives, and Republicans controlled 25. We weren't in a minority, we were in a super minority. And I remember coming up on the on the House floor and talking about the construction defect law that the Democrats thought was just a brilliant idea. This wasn't going to have any kind of an impact on housing development. This was going to be, make everybody's lives so much better. The reality of it, fast forward 10 years later, it's exactly what I thought was going to happen, which is basically we're not building any condominiums by and large in our whole state. And we haven't for almost 8 years now. So what does that mean exactly? It means that starter homes, you can't got a starter home for your young kid coming out of college, getting your first job. If you want to buy a condominium, there's basically almost no inventory. If you're downsizing as an adult, that whole section of the market has been basically eliminated in lieu of trial lawyers to give them opportunities to sue, start businesses and do developments if there's no return on their investment, or the risk is not commensurate with the rewards. So I want to do away entirely with the construction defects law, not try to reform it and make the trial lawyers happy. Do away with it entirely and let the market, the housing market, get back to equilibrium. I also want to allow builders and developers to be able to pull their own permits. Why should they have to deal with 64 different county bureaucracies across our state? Why couldn't you go to a qualified architect who has all the certifications, all the accreditations, all the proper insurance, and pull a building permit? Why should it take months and months and months to do anything? Let the market function, let it function properly. These are just some of the examples of regulations that have gone awry, where we've gone so far crazy to the left that people don't want to do better for themselves. There was a survey recently done where young people under 25 here in Colorado believe that they're better served to work in government than in the private sector. It's hard to believe. Now, this goes against our basic roots as a rugged people, as an individualistic people, a freedom-loving people. Government doesn't create any wealth in our society. The private sector is the only sole creator of wealth. Government is a transfer of wealth when they take money out of the private sector. So my plan is to roll back 100,000 pages of rules and regulations. How are we going to do that? We're going to bring in about a dozen people similar to myself that have a deep private sector background. So maybe they come from the medical industry, maybe a doctor, maybe retired nurses, maybe people that run nonprofits, also other fellow business owners and entrepreneurs and CEOs. And do a
bonfire.
What's that?
Large bonfire.
Large bonfire, very good. And basically do a top to bottom review of our whole regulatory scheme and figure out which rules can be entirely rolled back. But unlike me, these people are not going to have any interest in running for office, so they're not in any way conflicted. So they can actually make a difference and do something good, and actually figure out, get the government off our backs. Regulations should be used primarily when it's a matter of public safety. The government shouldn't be picking winners and losers. I mean, they don't have any skills to do that. Some bureaucrat sitting in some place, whether it's a city inspector or a building department or somebody in the Department of Regulatory Authority. We got to do better. We got to think about things differently. I also, as Bill said, I want to talk to you a little bit about health care. Since the Unaffordable Care Act was passed,
All right.
I get a pause for that.
it's been a great winner for 3 special interest groups. Do you know who the 3 big winners under the Unaffordable Care Act have been?
Insurance.
Insurance. Do you know what's happened in the insurance industry overall?
Massive rise in profits.
Exactly. So they started before the passage of the Unaffordable Care Act. That whole industry had about $8 billion in annual profits. Today, that number is about $17 billion as an industry. They've more than doubled their profits since the passage of the Unaffordable Care Act. Do you know who the other second big winner of the of the Unaffordable Care Act has been?
Hospitals?
Hospitals, very good, very well informed group. Exactly, hospitals are the other big winner. Do you know who the third big winner has been? Pharmaceutical companies. Exactly, 3 for 3, very good. That's a perfect score. Everyone else basically has gotten screwed. I mean, we have 40% of Coloradans today have health insurance, but can't meet their deductibles or co-payments. It's as if they have no insurance at all. We've had an explosion of Medicaid clinics all around our state. In fact, 1 in 4 Coloradans today are receiving some form of Medicaid. Make no mistake about it, Medicaid is ration care. It's low quality care. Matter of fact, very few doctors will even accept it because the reimbursements are so low. And if you earn, unless you earn less than $16,000 a year, you can't even really fully qualify for Medicaid. We've set up all these Medicaid clinics all over the state that are very expensive, very inefficient. They have no transparency in pricing. Last year, my wife and I were all places. We were at the Army-Navy game. Do we have any veterans in here? No veterans.
Jerry.
Very good. Jerry's a veteran.
He's quiet.
Yes. Thank you for your service. Well, our son, as I mentioned in the very brief intro, our son is just started his 3rd year at the United States Military Academy at West Point. And if you haven't ever been to an Army-Navy game, that should really be on your bucket list. It's really a tremendous experience. So Amy and I were fortunate last year to go to the Army-Navy game in Baltimore, Maryland. And go Army, they finally won for the first time in 15 years. It's like a miracle. It's like the Broncos winning the Super Bowl. So Amy said to me after the game, she said, you know, we should really consider driving next door to Virginia and taking a look at this rural health clinic. Amy and I have been financially supporting this health clinic for a number of years. We had actually never visited it. It's one of the most cutting-edge health clinics in the country. So we said, sure. So we drove across the border. We actually ended up driving 400 miles south, all the way deep into Appalachia country, right on the border with Kentucky. And what we saw was nothing less than a miracle, and I'll share the story with you. This tiny little health clinic in southern Virginia, it's a very small town called Wise, Virginia, does not accept any insurance whatsoever. They only do primary care, but they do primary care. They're run entirely with female nurse practitioners. They've got their community involved where they actually are taking volunteers in to do a lot of the administrative functions for their clinic. Their nurse practitioners write scripts, so they're almost like a doctor. They're spending about 40 minutes with every patient, but they're doing much more than the actual diagnostics. They're doing colonoscopies, they're doing mammograms. They've negotiated directly with General Electric to get x-ray equipment and PET scan equipment. They're doing mental health screening because in that part of the country there's a tremendous challenge with suicides in that part of the country. It's a coal mining country. When you have a serious illness, they actually log in to the University of Virginia at Charlottesville through telemedicine, and they get a specialist on the line if somebody has cancer or diabetes or something very serious. This past year, they serviced 25,000 people on $1.5 million budget. They charge $10 per visit. They've negotiated directly with pharmaceutical companies. They give you a $4 prescription drug voucher. They get half of their funding every year from the state of Virginia. The other half of their funding comes from either private donations or the actual revenues they get from visits. Now I tell you right here, after witnessing this, my wife and I can tell you that we have a terrific primary care doctor. We love our doctor. And the quality of care that these people are receiving there are every bit as good, if not better, than what we're getting. Or actually every bit as good as what any Colorado's getting from their primary care doctor. What really is the purpose of insurance? Shouldn't insurance be used for specialty care, chronic illness, and emergency services, where primary care should be open to the market with full transparency and pricing on a fee-based model? My plan is to get us entirely out of the Medicaid expansion, get us out of the exchange, and take that $640 million a year that we're currently using to subsidize Medicaid and provide block grants to nurse practitioner clinics, to physician assistant clinics, to mental health professionals, where they would have to submit a budget every year, fully transparent of what their fee schedule will be. It might be a monthly fee schedule, it might be a per visit fee schedule, where they provide a whole slew and it would be open to any Coloradan, rich or poor, rural or urban, where basically primary care, any Coloradan can access high quality primary care without the need for insurance. We get back to our roots where insurance is used just for specialty, long-term illness, chronic care, emergency services. As I said earlier, We visited a number of Medicaid clinics. We were in Rocky Ford recently, about a month and a half ago. And we met this wonderful couple. They were farmers, cantaloupe farmers. And they took me aside and they said, it's very interesting about what you're doing with talking about these nurse practitioner clinics. And they said, my husband needs a procedure done. He needs an MRI done. And we have insurance, but we have an $11,000 deductible. That's actually quite common to have $10,000 or higher deductibles today. And they said, the procedure costs $2,500. We only have one rural hospital in our community. I said, really? So Amy and I got on the phone. We called a place called Dry Creek Imaging in Englewood. They could do the identical procedure for $600. Now that's the power of transparency in pricing. Part of my vision for our healthcare is anytime you go to any kind of a healthcare provider, whether it's a hospital or a service provider in any way, shape, or form, they have to provide you what all the cash prices are and what all the insurance prices are in the full light of day, where patients can rate their experiences with their providers, they can have peer-to-peer reviews, and you can actually shop around and actually have the power of the market. That's the power of transparency in pricing. Somehow between those three big winners I described earlier, the hospitals and the pharmaceutical companies, we're not getting any transparency in pricing. We haven't put our own people ahead of what's in their best interest. In fact, Colorado has the healthiest population in the country. We have some of the youngest, most educated workforce in the country. Our health challenges are different than any other state in the union. We need a health policies and a health vision that's fundamentally different than the way things are done as well around the country. We don't need people from DC or under the Unaffordable Care Act telling us, hey, you're going to run your health care this way. And by the way, if you run a Medicaid clinic, you have to have a CEO, a CFO. They have sometimes up to $1 million of just administrative costs just to run their clinic before they even provide any services. I mean, it's a ridiculous system. It's a poor system. The other thing I want to talk to you a little bit about is our infrastructure here in Colorado. Yes, sir.
Your statement about your Virginia health clinic,
Yes, sir.
the thing that I took away from it was how much money they spent a year and how many people they served. And I was just hoping to hear you say that again.
So as I said earlier, this past year they serviced 25,000 patients for $1.5 million.
Let me just jump in here. Do you wish to be interrupted with questions?
I don't mind.
Then
You know,
go ahead.
Yeah, we're
Mike
gonna
is
get some
next.
Q&A at the
I was
end
going
for
to do
sure,
Q&A. I just want to talk to you a little bit about transportation, unless you want to go straight to questions. Let me just finish up in 2 minutes, and then you guys can ask me whatever questions you'd like to ask me. No problem at all. The way this process works is we work for you, not the other way around. So we have too many politicians. We don't have to be so formal. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I think it's really important because infrastructure is such a fundamental issue. Infrastructure in Colorado today, the Colorado Department of Transportation, CDOT, has roughly a $1.6 billion budget. If you're following what's going on, basically our roads and infrastructure has been a consistent pattern now for several decades. They keep getting worse and worse. We have chronic congestion, we have bridges falling apart, and there's really been absolutely no leadership. So I actually I was fortunate enough to sit down with the executive director of CDOT. And let me tell you, he's now recently agreed to resign, which I think is very welcoming news. I mean, it's really been probably of all the bureaucracies in state government, this may have very well be the worst managed bureaucracy. What I discovered was of their $1.6 billion state budget, about 70% and general administrative costs. In fact, they have 3,300 employees. Only about $500 million a year actually hits contractors' hands that actually build our infrastructure out of a $1.6 billion budget.
Wow.
Here's my plan for CDOT and reforming our transportation needs. First and foremost, I'm not for any new taxes or any new fees or any new bonds whatsoever. I want to bring in an outsider reformer that really understands transportation, understands development, and reform that whole department. But again, unlike me, has no ambition to ever run for office, so they won't be in any way conflicted out. I want to limit CDOT's budget, general administrative costs, to no more than 20%. That alone would free up about $700 million to hit contractors' hands. I also discovered with CDOT they have about $1 billion of cash and cash equivalents today on their balance sheet. I'd like to immediately deploy that. The third thing I want to do is I want to change our legislative audit committee. Unless you actually served in the General Assembly, most people haven't heard of this obscure committee. This obscure committee actually is completely bipartisan, has equal members of Republicans and Democrats, equal numbers of House members and senators. And what this little committee does is it audits state bureaucracies. So if you want to look at the Colorado State Fair, it will tell you where all the assets and liabilities and cash on hand properly accrued for. They outsource all their accounting to third-party accountants, people like KPMG and others. I want to change the mandate of that committee, where instead of doing financial auditing, they're actually going to do performance audit. So they're going to look at a company, they're going to look at a bureaucracy like CDOT, and they're going to say, you really don't need 3,300 employees. We want to right-size your department to 1,800 employees. And by the way, implement this type of traffic science, these types of applications, these types of information technologies to make the department, make the bidding process, expedite the process more effectively. What that does is it takes all the partisanship and all the gridlock out of the process. It gives political cover to Democrats and Republicans to do the right thing. If we change that one committee, and we can save up to 4%, which is a rounding error in many cases, that's another $1 billion a year that could go directly into higher teacher pay, that go immediately into more improved roads and other infrastructure. So I know that there's a number of good candidates in this race. It's a very highly competitive primary process in the Republican field, as well as even the Democratic field. They have a number of candidates as well. But what's some things that are unique to me that I thought I might share with you, that has formed who I am as a man. I was raised by a single mother who's 90% blind and deaf. She left my father when I was 11 years old, me and my 2 older sisters. I left my 2 older sisters and my father behind, moved cross country to take care of her at the age of 11. I started working at age 13. I'm a product of public schools, I'm a product of a public university. I know what it is to overcome tremendous adversity. In fact, we were almost homeless several times. We moved more than a dozen times over the preceding 6 or 7 years. But more importantly, I know what it is to rise up and become successful. And we should be rewarding success, not demonizing it. I also have a unique blend of both public and private sector experience. I served 1 term in the legislature, and unlike a traditional politician, I went right back in to the private sector. I think you can serve your community not just in government, but equally effectively outside of government. But most especially, I've signed the front side of a paycheck in a whole range of industries. I started one of the most successful private telecom companies in the country. I built 6 different businesses in 6 different industries. And the essence of being an entrepreneur is somebody that thinks differently. That's somebody that creates extraordinary teams to do collectively amongst themselves bigger and better than they can do individually. Somebody that's not afraid to take risks. Somebody that actually thinks differently. But most especially, the essence of an entrepreneur is being a problem solver. And we just have to start solving our problems. Otherwise, I'm concerned as our discourse is so negative, is so mean-spirited the way it is today, we're going to head in a direction that we don't want our country and our state to go. So my name is Victor Mitchell. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I hope I wasn't too long-winded, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you guys so much for listening here today.
We have Mike, we have Larry, and then we have Scott.
Excellent.
With regard to your clinic,
And Mike, can I ask you, really speak up or move the microphone?
I'm all for figuring out what innovations are actually possible, given that we have such a, put it politely, screwed up system. You alluded that your clinic had a number of innovations, but from my engineering quantitative perspective, I'd like to have a little bit more about a cost comparison or some way of really understanding how much better that clinic actually is.
That's a very fair question. We visited, let me share a Medicaid clinic in Olathe that we visited recently.
Okay.
This past year, their budget was $8 million, and they serviced, I think, 11,000 patients.
Okay.
This particular clinic serviced 25,000 patients. Now, Medicaid is strict, so they're on a sliding scale, primarily a reimbursement directly from the state of Colorado. In other words, they're about 8 times more expensive
Good. Now we're getting
than a fee-based model without insurance, where they don't have any of the red tape that a traditional Medicaid clinic would have. And it's even worse than that. I should say the clinic model is even better than that, because my experience has been, I think that the clinic model, they're spending about 40 minutes with each patient.
Yeah.
What's so incredible
That
about
is incredible.
they're spending so much high quality time, they're getting to know their patients. It's just a better, more effective model than what we have today in Medicaid. Medicaid, make no mistake about it, has impacted every state bureaucracy in government. We are underfunding our prisons We are underfunding our infrastructure. We are underfunding, we're paying our teachers miserable starting salaries. It has affected, it's overwhelmed our entire state government today. It has been a failed experiment, this whole Unaffordable Care Act.
Right. Totally agree.
We have Larry next.
I have three questions, if you don't mind.
Okay.
What does, can you tell me what Article 6, Clause 2 and 3 of the United States Constitution says?
No, I can't tell you that.
You're running for office? I don't know that.
Well, you doesn't have to memorize the Constitution.
Take it easy, Larry. Take it easy. Take it easy.
Why don't you share with me what it is? I've read the Constitution. I haven't memorized all the different clauses and articles.
Okay, well then, you don't know about Article 1, Clause 9, Section 8, or Article 1, Clause 10, Section 1, or the 13th Amendment that was ratified
I've been
in
trying to get him
1819. Am I correct? You don't know? You don't
Not off the top of my head, no. I'd have to look at it. Why don't you tell me what you're referencing?
I'm going to jump in here. Larry, I would doubt that 8 out of 9 Supreme Court justices would be able to quote, would be able to answer your question. So I don't think it's a fair question. My apologies for saying that.
I think it's a very fair question. You're supposed to know the law. Everybody in here is supposed to know the law. That's
what
what
you're referencing, not just the numbers.
Okay.
That's what would happen.
All right. Well, if we don't know the law, we're not civilized, are we? We don't have a civilized society. We're just a bunch of barbarians running around.
Let me, in all fairness, Larry, let me just tell you this. When you run for office and you create a company or you create a nonprofit, you're never going to be an expert in every area. You're only as good as the team you surround yourself with. I mean, and I think your track records matter. You know, your point is well taken that we have people that run for office that we base so much on the 3-minute scripted speech. Substance matters, track record matters. For 30 years, I've created extraordinary organizations. For 30 years, I've never had an employee labor dispute. I've never had a bankruptcy, never even had an adversarial judgment against that. I've had great relationships I work with when I was elected. I only served for 2 years. Most of the legislators I work with are actively helping me because they want an outsider, independent-minded, thinking conservative to run our state. And they're tired of losing to liberal Democrats. So what you're saying, I think the premise of what you're saying is exactly right. I have not memorized the Constitution. If I don't know something, I'm not a politician. I'm a leader, and I'm not somebody that I'm an outsider. I've spent my career developing large, complex organizations, most of the time from nothing. So I'd be happy to answer what those particular provisions are if you want to share that with me, or.
So,
Let's go over this.
okay. All right. Why isn't the Constitution being taught in schools?
Should be taught. Civics should be taught at the broadest levels. I mean, there is no greater challenge Colorado's facing today than 50% of our at-risk kids cannot do college-level work after they graduate from Colorado Public High School. And what skills do they have? They're not being taught vocational trades. Most of these kids are not being, especially in rural parts of our state, they're not teaching AP classes. These kids are going into society with basically very few relevant skills to compete in a modern economy. There is nothing greater challenge today than we have in our state than fixing that problem. And the teachers' unions have run roughshod over school choice. They are controlling our curriculum. They are controlling tenured pay. They won't allow unaccredited teachers to teach, even when you have math and science shortages of many teachers across our state. So there's no question, public education is critical. Civics should be taught, I believe, should be taught in all public schools, aggressively taught. I also think we should revisit summer schooling as well, so we can lower that amount of remediation for kids that don't know the process. We should limit the amount of testing we do. We shouldn't be teaching the test. It should be a random test date. No one knows when it is. It should be open book, open internet, because that's how the modern economy works today. So we need fundamental changes today, the way what we're teaching our kids and getting them grounded where they have a fighting chance to compete in today's world.
Okay.
Our next speaker, our next question.
Excuse me, I had 3 questions.
You gave him the 3. You gave him the article this, article that, article that.
No,
you
I
gave
was
three,
testing
over
on-
3.
I
and
was
now
testing on the
Can we please let
Constitution.
somebody else talk to him?
Okay,
Could you?
And you know what, Larry? We'll return to you after other people.
go ahead.
Okay. Scott, you're next.
Okay, I get to speak on the economics of medicine next week, so I'll address a lot of things at that time rather than now.
Yes.
But I did want to mention a couple of things. You mentioned before the talk that you were interested in your son going to medical school.
I would love for. Unfortunately, he's studying international relations and Persian. But we failed. We wanted to go into medical to study pre-med.
I can tell you that you can't force or push somebody, but
You know, I was kidding. I said that in jest.
you brought up the issue of apprenticeship.
Yes.
And I think it's important for people to understand that doctors have to do an apprenticeship. It's called an internship or
Absolutely, residency, of course.
And the minimum is for basic, like primary care, is 3 years.
Yes.
And yes, you are usually paid something. You don't have to pay to do it, but you aren't really in practice until you finish your residency. For some things like cardiac surgery, plastic surgery, residency can be 7 years.
Of course.
So that's a problem in medicine. as
And
well.
just to put it in some perspective, to be a primary care physician, you set up to 3 years of residency. Today in Colorado, the apprenticeship period to become an electrician is almost 5 years.
So that's why they're using.
Put that in some perspective.
That's why they're using nurse practitioners and physician assistants and so on, because they don't have to spend that long.
Yes.
Training. Then you mentioned efficiency and the true cost, like this clinic that you mentioned.
Yes, sir.
And I just wanted to point out, this is the same thing you see in education. The difference between private education, which looks expensive because people have to pay for it,
Yes.
but the per pupil cost that they're incurring is public education. So anything the government does is inefficient and wasteful, as well as usually poorly done in comparison to private. And the other thing I just wanted to touch on, because the woman who spoke last week, I didn't think got it either. Insurance, I think you're misusing the term insurance when it comes to medical. Insurance, you're confusing it with coverage, because you mentioned chronic conditions and so on. Insurance, properly done, is only to cover things that you don't want to happen, you don't think are going to happen, but if they did happen, you couldn't pay for them. That's all that insurance is good for covering. And if you confuse it with coverage for this, that, or whatever you need or think you need, it's like insurance for your groceries. And I'm going to make the point of bringing that up. If you think about what would happen if your groceries were covered by insurance, you get an idea of how distorted and what a problem we see when medical care is confused with insurance, medical insurance.
It's a good point. I mean, because I generally interchange those words, coverage and insurance, and to me they're synonymous. And what you're saying is they're distinctly different.
You can have
Fair
plans
point,
that
yes.
provide for coverage, but they aren't really insurance,
Yes.
at least in the proper sense of the word.
Yes.
So
The literal sense.
I'll leave it at that. Thank you for.
Okay, we have Mike who's next.
Yes, Mike.
I'm.
Can I ask you to stand up, Mike, and hold the mic?
All right, here we go. I was very interested to hear what you had to say about CDOT. During the flood of 2013, it seemed to me that, and I happen to be up in the mountains and therefore basically cut off mostly from civilization. It seemed to me that CDOT was doing a piss-poor job of communicating or even knowing what it would take to fix the problems, and therefore the communication was very poor. So I just wanted to encourage you that yes, let's reform CDOT. I somehow think they've lost their way when it comes to actually providing proper service to the population of Colorado. So, yeah, anything else you want to add?
The only thing, CDOT does deserve credit in one area, which is a legitimate area. They have figured out a way to tap into every dollar of matching dollars from the federal government. That was the thing that actually, so there's really no, they're not leaving any money on the table from what they can get from federal matching. They're just incredibly wasteful, very political It's a very badly managed organization. I've been calling for the current executive director to resign for some time. I think we need a reformer in there, somebody that's has a deep understanding of our culture, our values here in Colorado, that has deep development experience and contracting experience, and somebody will come in and bring the necessary reforms in. But we have to look at the whole way we're even running ourselves as a government.
Absolutely, yes. Any libertarian will definitely wholeheartedly
How
agree
many of
with
you
that.
guys are registered libertarians or registered in another party? You guys are all registered, so unfortunately you guys can't vote for me. You'd have to change to unaffiliated. Now unaffiliates can vote for me as well as of course Republicans can in the primary. But
Open primary?
no, because it's not an open primary. You have to either be unaffiliated or party affiliated. So you could vote for a Libertarian, of course, but you couldn't vote for a Republican or Democrat if you're registered as a Libertarian. Just like me, as I'm a registered Republican, I couldn't vote for a Democrat or a Libertarian in the primary. So something to
Your
consider.
name, sir.
It's Ian. But that's I'm just going to interject briefly. We'll continue to take a couple more questions here. Speaking of that, if you feel inspired by something you heard today and you think we can bring back competent, ethical, visionary leadership into our elected positions, and you do feel so inclined to register as unaffiliated so you can participate in the primary process on the Republican gubernatorial race, we'd be honored to earn your support. That said, we're so happy to be here with you today, to have a chance to be here while you take time out of your busy schedules to come together and share your ideas and visions for Colorado, and we really appreciate that opportunity to gain perspective. You're obviously such a well-informed group, like we said earlier.
Gained all three of the points on the
Yeah, exactly.
big winners
That
of
is-
the Unaffordable Care Act.
And that's
That was
it. It just
impressive.
shows you are really invested in your community and making sure that you have your eyes wide open, as it say.
Ian, you
But
said bring back competent leadership?
yeah,
When have we ever had competent leadership?
I don't know. We might be 1860s or like
And Scott is next.
but that being said, I'm just going to pass around a sheet where you can, if you sign in here today, it just gets you a follow-up email from Victor. It doesn't put you on a mass mailing list. I also just let you know when we're doing events here in Boulder. If you'd like to get out or invite a friend of yours to come.
To the highest dollar. You blow up your phones.
So opportunities for you to get introduced or bring out another friend to get introduced to Victor. You'll also see on here, it has a couple of things where it says, I'm interested in hosting an event. You know some people within your network, your community who'd like to get introduced to one of the people running for governor here. You can also mark that you're interested in volunteering. That could be as simple as passing out literature at a local club that you're a member of, or even just liking and following us on Facebook and sharing our posts or inviting your friends to like that as well. And then lastly, you'll see on here there's a donation of $20.18
Victory 2018.
for Victory in 2018. We haven't held any fundraisers, any time spent dialing for dollars. We're spending all of our time out here doing grassroots events. We've been to 58 counties, done over 350 of these events, getting to know people, getting to understand the issues impacting their communities. So that small donation goes a long way to keeping the gas in our tank. We've driven tens of thousands of miles, or even just the wind in our sails, knowing that people out there are inspired that we can do better with our elected officials and we can bring, as I said, competency back into our institutions. So thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it. I'm happy to answer questions.
Scott, please speak loudly because the microphone's all the way there.
I just wondered what's the deadline or mechanism for changing your registration to
participate in
unaffiliated?
the primary. I believe you can, if you were to go to the polls, you could same day register. To get the mail ballot mailed to you, it would be by mid-May of next year.
But I would do it sooner than later. I mean,
Yes.
because your vote never counts more than in the primary. It's an off-year election. Republicans, of course, are in power, so the party out of power generally does well in those kinds of off-year elections. Probably at best, there'll be 20% of the population will actually vote in the primary. So your vote, it's probably going to come down to, I've got to beat George Bush's cousin, I've got to beat Mitt Romney's nephew, I've got to be a high-profile government lawyer, I've got to be a former congressman. Your vote really, really matters. I mean, it'll probably be less than 1,000 votes will determine who will get the Republican nomination. That's why your vote tremendously matters.
So,
We
that's a great
have
question.
this
I can
gentleman,
use
and
this
then we'll
one.
have Larry.
Hi, thank you for the talk. In terms of transportation.
Yes, sir.
There was a bridge built across I-25, 20, maybe 30 years ago. They gave an experimental clause which gave them more money if they finished sooner or less money if they finished later. They finished it in record time. The people driving on it had very few delays, very few problems. They were all happy. But the people who mattered were the other contractors who hollered their heads off, and so they've never tried another clause like that again. In Arizona, going into Phoenix on the freeway, you have ground up tires instead of asphalt. It's 20 decibels quieter and lasts twice as long between repavings. On the East Coast, they use ground up bottles instead of pebbles. We have a whole host of technologies that have been demonstrated and are successful, and they never get into the public paving process.
So let me answer those questions. First and foremost, I fully support performance-based incentives.
Yay!
Of course. I mean, I've done that my whole career in business, and they work. I also believe in guaranteed maximum pricing contracts, so that you can't have, you basically require performance bonds, which basically CDOT does already. But what's different is they should have guaranteed maximum pricing. So the risk is pushed onto the contractor, as opposed to if there's concrete prices, cement prices. With respect to better use of technology, last year, of all places, Amy and I did a cultural immersion in Southeast Asia. And we went to, of all places, we went to Tibet. And I don't know if you know much about Tibet. It's been overrun by communist China. They basically, the Chinese have come into the Tibetans' country and taken over the whole country. But in this tiny little country, they have this extraordinary amount of infrastructure. I mean, their infrastructure is some of the best infrastructure in the world. And if you're a Tibetan and you want to drive from point A to point B, you go on to something like coloradotraffic.gov. And it tells you the optimum time to travel. And if you travel during that time, you can use their express lanes for a deep discount or as little as free. Is another button, you click here, and it tells you other people in the area that might be traveling a similar distance, and if you'd like to carpool with them. These types of applications are actually available and functioning today, but we're so bogged down in partisan bickering and not problem solving. It's very easy to be against something. It's hard to be for something. And you'll notice that, and that's basically what's happened with all these rigid ideologues that we keep electing. But I think we need to fully embrace technology, better use of technology. The next governor is going to oversee automated driving. Make no mistake about it, it's coming, and it's going to have it's going to reduce fatalities, but it's also going to displace a great amount of workers and most people who use their vehicles or trucks for a living. So we're going to have to think about things very differently than we've done them in the past.
Larry is next, but I'm going to stop this. I need 2 minutes to stop the recording, and then we'll restart, Larry. Start recording again. And let me get to Larry. Hold on 1 second. Larry, you're up.
Okay, are you aware that every law in Colorado that was passed since 1963 is void ab initio?
None of the people who voted for it had filed their bonds, therefore they were vacant offices, and the whole thing is a fraud.
I know you said that to me earlier today. I mean, I've never heard this argument that you have to bond in order to be in a high-level elected position. Because I don't know enough about it, so I'm going to have to research it and understand it better.
So let me jump in for Larry. If you're elected governor, will you bond yourself?
If I'm required by law, of course. I mean, I'm going to abide by the law in whatever the law is, and if I don't like the law, I'm going to try to reform the law. We can't have a society where like you have sanctuary cities where the mayors, certain mayors like the mayor in Boulder says, you know what, I don't like this law, so I'm just not going to cooperate with the federal ICE officials. And by the way, I like this law, so we're going to aggressively enforce this. I mean, that's how you create anarchy. You have to evenly, effectively, and equitably apply the law in whatever form it is. So if that is the law, of course I will comply with it.
Let me ask Larry a question. If our guest today does bond himself upon election, will he be, in your opinion, will he be a legally elected official?
Yes.
Well, please bond yourself. Okay, is there anybody
I
else?
might point out that the governor right now, another point, one of the jobs of the governor and the attorney general is to check the bond of the treasurer. Okay? Kaufman and Chicken Pooper haven't done that. They're out. They're breaching their fiduciary duty.
I understand, Larry, that's what your opinion of the law is. And I told you earlier, I just don't know enough about it to opine on it.
Well, go read 24-22-101, paragraph 1.
If you have a memorandum of law, you can email him.
I said, I'll take a look at your white paper, I'll forward it to our team. Absolutely. I am a vociferous reader, so I read pretty much everything I get my hands on that I think can understand the issues. At the end of the day, I mean, I'm a problem solver, I'm not a rigid ideologue, I'm not indebted to any special interest groups. As a matter of fact, I'm not even taking any money from any special interest groups, even groups that I generally agree with. I think we need to have fiercely independent conservatives running state government who are outsiders. If I'm fortunate enough to get elected next year, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to serve 2 terms, and I'm going to go right back into the private sector right after that and never run for office again. I mean, I just think that's the way our democracy was set up. We were never set up to have these career politicians that run from one office to another because they need a job for whatever reasons. They're indebted to special interest groups. It's part of the reason why we have such challenges in our state and country. We just can't seem to get anywhere. We're so paralyzed with so much bickering, but there's not any voices of reason to actually get things and done in an imaginative, creative way. We have the same old tired arguments over and over again, but we don't seem to move the ball forward.
Our next speaker is Steve, then Kate, then Ralph.
Yeah, she had a question.
Steve was
Steve,
first.
then Kate, then Ralph.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess I just want to know what your stance is with the school choice thing. You said a lot of different stuff about public education.
Yes.
And so good layout with.
So I've been involved in the school choice movement for decades. I was served on the House Ed Committee. I've taught at 2 major state universities, including CSU last year. I believe in all forms of school choice, and I think that the money of the student should follow the student wherever they go. There's make no mistake about it. The teachers' unions has an extraordinary amount of power, influence, and run roughshod. If you care about school choice, you could never really ever vote for a Democrat, because basically they're completely owned and paid for by the teachers' unions. They control everything that they do. It was the only time actually when I was in the General Assembly I actually witnessed firsthand corruption where the unions knew every vote of every member of the committee before there was even an argument, public discussion about whatever the policies are. That's the bad news. So we can weaken the unions with giving existing due-paying members of teachers to go have alternative options. But more importantly, there's never been a better time for school choice in the school choice movement. There is extraordinary rich content online today through websites like Khan Academy, where you can learn calculus or physics online in the classroom. We need to embrace a lot more online content curriculum, most especially in rural and parts of our state where they're having difficult time attracting teachers to teach. As I said earlier, we should allow unaccredited teachers to teach. I have a master's degree. I've taught at 2 state universities. I can't teach in a Colorado public high school. So even I've run 6 successful because of the way they establish tenure, the way they establish their accreditation process. So it is set up to fail. And we have so many, the kids who are at risk, the kids who are generally on subsidized lunches, those are the big losers to this process. We have such school choice all around the suburban and urban areas of Colorado. But you know, you go into the inner cities, they have almost no school choice, or very limited school choice options. So it needs fundamental structural reform on school choice. But I support all forms of school choice. Charters, even getting out of the Blaine Amendment. I don't know if you know that, which has been very controversial. I think we should pull out of the Blaine Amendment because I think it's bigoted against Catholic schools.
Our next speaker, questioner is Kate. Kate, you're on.
He just asked my question, so.
You were going to ask that,
Yeah, so
so you have children in schools?
no, I'm just interested
I'm
in
just
it.
interested in that.
Okay, Larry has another question, and then
Another question, I wanted to modify my answer to your question. Okay, he will lawfully hold office if he files his bond timely.
Okay.
Okay? Timely, as required by
And that timely would be
Second
within
Tuesday
10
in
days
January.
of being elected?
Second Tuesday in January.
That's right. And he doesn't get the keys to the office until then.
All right.
Can I just say one more thing about
Steve,
our
go ahead,
class?
quickly.
You mentioned the vocational education a lot. How would that figure in? Is that something in public
Vocational
schools or
trades,
separate schools?
so right now, we need reforms in the way, does anybody know how many school districts we have in Colorado? How many counties do we have in Colorado?
64.
There's 64 counties, we have almost twice as many school districts in Colorado. I was just this past week in Kit Carson, Burlington, and on the Eastern Plains. They have 5 school districts. They have a population of 8,300 people. Their average school is 120 kids, K through 12.
Why have
They
any
have 5
districts?
they have 5, that means that you have to have 5 superintendents, 5 different principals, 5 different boards. I mean, it's unbelievable how inefficient. So that doesn't mean we should be closing schools down, but it means that we should be, they get close to $12,000 to $14,000 per kid, which is pretty high per pupil funding. Yet they are constantly out of money because they don't have any scale. There's no efficiencies to the way they do that. So we have to think about things in a whole different way than we're doing them right now. But we've got to, reforms have to start at the top. We have to take risks. We have to think about things much differently in reforming our schools. But vocational trades should be taught at all rural schools. If we can consolidate some of these ridiculous, we have so many school districts. Alone, that one county alone, Kit Carson, a county of 8,300, mostly a farming community, agriculture, that's $1 million a year that go directly into teaching vocational schooling, which I think is just essential. And this misnomer that kids don't want to break into these trades is just not true. We've created barriers where they can't break into them. They got to work for 5 years without making any money. They got to go, since they're not getting the skills in school, then they got to go to a trade school, which costs $40,000, $50,000 to get the requisite skills to compete. Combine that, all the debt they have to take on, you combine that with the blocks and all the apprenticeship periods, that's why you're having a shortage of so many of these trades.
We have this gentleman who wishes
And
to
then we
speak.
probably-
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying, we had time for like one more question, maybe through it.
Oh, you have to run?
Yeah, but I just think before we.
Okay, then,
No, we can take it around a little
If
bit.
they- 10, 15 minutes.
oh,
Guys,
then this gentleman next, and then me.
Yes.
Why are you talking about consolidating school districts when you should be talking about abolishing school districts?
Very good.
Abolishing school districts.
And now you know the difference between Republicans and Libertarians. Okay, are you finished? Are you finished?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll jump in.
Please.
Might I recommend that you do not ask for $20.18, but ask for $20.18 less 19 cents, giving your people a discount, so that we're not listed on the I could not be listed, for instance, contributing to you because I'm the chair of the Libertarian Party. It probably just wouldn't look right.
We're also
So you
accepting
get
$19.99.
You will accept $19.
Not
Okay, you will not fight more.
No, we will not fight you on that. The reason being that we are taking almost all small donations. We took in 188 donations this past quarter, we were the only candidate that actually had an increase from quarter to quarter in individual donation. We're not taking any special interest money whatsoever, and our donations on average are less than $50. But the reason being is because my opponents love to go to the media and say that they have all this, phony momentum. High dollar donations. So the only area that we're behind our opponents in is individual donations. So we do like to report even in small dollar amounts. But that's the only reason, because it just creates a false narrative in the media, and they like to go around and they like to do things like that. It's just part of the political game.
And I'm going to just sort of wrap
But
this
I
up,
would be very happy.
unless there's somebody who needs Larry and then me.
Okay, are you aware what a Republican form of government is?
I believe it's a representative form of government where we work on behalf of the people, and it's not a lynch mob where it's direct vote. It's done through a representative democracy.
No. It's where we've got 3 individual segments of government.
Sure.
Legislative.
Of course, the judicial and the executive branch of government.
Right. Then why are we having attorneys in the other places in government? What are you going to do about it? We have attorneys in the legislature. We've had attorneys who have been governors, and they've got no business in there. That's a unless they give up their bar card.
Well, I could agree. I think we have way too many attorneys in government, and running for the CEO of the state, which is basically when you're running for governor, it's a different skill set than an attorney has. The attorneys are good arguers. If you have a if you have a legal problem, they're good to hire. But you're absolutely right. I mean, if you want to hire an executive, you should hire somebody with executive experience. They control 100% of the judicial branch of government. They control the majority of our Congress. Most of our legislators are also attorneys. Doesn't mean that attorneys are bad. There'll be attorneys in my administration. But I would agree we have just too many elected attorneys. I would completely agree with that.
And I would like to sort of, are there any other questions before I make my outrageous recommendation to a guest? You may want to be here for this. Would you be willing to entertain the thought of hiring this gentleman to be the director of CDOT? Because he seems to understand how to make things work.
I don't know anything about his professional background.
You don't need to know anything. He knows what he's talking about.
We'll talk.
I mean, make no mistake about it, my cabinet will be made up almost exclusively of outsiders, people non-government, non-elected. There'll be a few people that come from government, but make no mistake about it, it's also very useful the fact that I served one term in the legislature. I've passed very substantive legislation, even though I was in the minority. Understanding and appreciating the legislative process is a big deal. Look at our president today. He's having tremendous difficulties working with the legislative arm of our government, so the legislative branch of our government. So thank you guys so much.
And
God bless. I hope to earn your support. If you want to vote for me, you would have to change your party affiliation to either Republican or unaffiliated, and I'd love to have your support. Thank you so much.
And I would, and that's what I wanted. I wanted a round of applause for the next possible.
You guys are funny. I really enjoyed you guys. This is why, I mean, we've done like 350 events. I'd say this is one of the most unique events I've done so far. It's really
And
fun.
I hope that in the Larry, do you want to say something else
I mean, at the end
again?
of the day, we're all Americans. I mean, we might think and look. And
You're
act
reaching out. I
differently,
didn't
we're all
know if you were raising your hand.
Oh, no, I was putting the water back, I think.
Okay.
Or
Oh, let's talk about that. Water. How are you going? Colorado is gaining what? 50,000, 100,000 people a year. One of our at the last NPR interview with Governor, what did you call him?
Chicken Cooper?
Chicken Cooper?
chicken Cooper.
Chicken Cooper. Okay, I'm not going to be that offensive. When Hickenlooper was on NPR, he said that the water was far less of a problem than traffic congestion. Could you address that?
I mean, they're apples and oranges. Well, I'm by far in no means an expert on water.
Okay.
But I'd be happy to tell you my general thoughts. I've met with a number of water experts, and I will absolutely be bringing somebody into my administration that really, most especially has a rural perspective. There's a lot of our rural parts, our western slope communities, water has basically been ripped off. We have some counties. Have you guys ever heard of a county called Crowley County? Does anybody know where that is?
Yes.
Where is it?
I believe it's in the southeastern part of the state.
Yeah, very good. It's east of Pueblo. It's east of Pueblo, and Crowley County is almost exclusively an agricultural community. It's a very poor county, one of actually the poorest counties in the whole United States. And they sold 100% of their water. They have no water. They're an agricultural county here in Colorado. You go to them, it feels like a third world country going into their community. So first and foremost, we've got to think about ways to trap every ounce of water that we're legally entitled to trap. We should be investing in technologies, watersheds. There's a number of watersheds, especially on the eastern plains, that have been put out of commission that could be reinstituted very cost effectively. The notion that we are not trapping every ounce of water. We should also have a public awareness campaign led by the governor for the latest technologies to have water efficiency of waters. And we got to make sure that our rural communities have the proper amounts of water so they can actually provide for themselves and have a life for themselves. But by and large, I wouldn't compare it to economic development and population growth. We have a tremendous advantage being a state with a tremendous amount of snow melt We have a number of rivers here. We've never had the political will because the environmentalists have taken over our state to a large extent. To doing the right things to build safe, environmentally sensitive watersheds, so we are trapping every ounce of water we're entitled to.
Just out of curiosity, are you familiar with the multi-state compact on water?
Not particularly.
Okay. It's something you may want to become familiar with because it's something that is actually quite important.
Oh, it's extremely
Basic-
important.
Yeah,
How much
basically.
water we're entitled to, how much water the states downstream are entitled to.
Exactly. That's what the compact is, and I believe that it is administered. I may be wrong on this. I believe it is administered by the U.S. Supreme Court. I know that the multi-state compact on Lake Michigan water is regulated by the
Any
Supreme Court.
multi-state pact would have to be administered through federal court anyway. That's no question about it. Well, thank you guys.
Okay,
God bless.
let's get another round of applause. Larry, do you want to harass our guest one more time?
Yes, you,
Thanks for your support. It's nice to see some young people participating.
Yes.
We need more young people. We need young